Oh hey, it's every weekend. Some more fighting games talk would be neat.
No.
Okay. How about...
Hey, I'm back from the April Fool's timeline. Let's talk anime some more.
Absolutely not.
Wow, the other timeline's Galen is way less rude. What's happening?
Tactics Ogre Reborn is happening. Tactics Ogre Reborn is definitively, actually, truthfully happening. It's not a rumor, it's not hearsay, it's real. They pretended it wasn't happening with each rumor and leak, but it's real. It's really happening, so you will not take this away from me any longer. We will talk about tactical RPG music, and we will have a good time. Understood?
Yes,
sir.
Welcome to Music Arcade. Hello, everyone. I'm Galen, the sound guy Firestone.
I'm Ranakel 3-dimensional this time.
Hi, I'm Sam Zeral Ziegelman.
Welcome back. And I am excited about this episode, as you can tell by the intro.
No, we are excited about this episode, actually.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty excited as well. This is gonna be
fun. Man, I have been begging for Tactics Ogre and FFT on Steam for basically ever, and now it's actually going to occur. I'm giddy, and I'm like, we need to do an episode to celebrate.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like the theme has been on the docket for a while. Initially, we planned to do it at least when Triangle Strategy released.
Mm-hmm.
And Tactics is such a nice comfort genre.
It is. And I've been known to play some, there was a couple indie ones that I was looking at songs for this episode. A game called Fell Seal, which I really fell in love with. Obviously the Mercenaries games, which are hilariously semi-competent.
Yes.
There was all sorts of ones that I was looking at. And this is just one of these genres that I keep going back to and usually have a good time with. So I thought it'd be a good idea to hit the button on this one finally with the announcement of a game that probably shouldn't exist, but I'm so glad it will.
Even though we still need a few more details to be sure which version it is.
Yeah, it seems largely based on the PSP version, but there's some questions that still need answering, and hopefully in the coming months before November happens, they will be answered. But until
honestly, we take what we can get.
Honestly, we take what we can get. I'm sure I'll have a good time with the game anyway, and I know several other friends of mine who will as well, but likely you guys, who knows?
Yeah, like, if we can have fun with some perfectly middle-of-the-road games, we can have fun with Tactics Ogre once more.
Yes, which...
And for me, I'm not usually a person who plays tactical RPGs, but I'm interested as well. The hype around it is sounding great.
I mean, it's a very good game.
Oh, yeah. I put 200 hours into the PSP version.
I didn't, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
Fair enough. And before I move on, I want to just say something real quick. So, out of most of my friends, I'm one of the few people who had the Tactics Ogre experience in the past and still play Final Fantasy XIV. Now, there's a dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV called Palace of the Dead, and the 100th floor boss of the Palace of the Dead is a guy by the name of Nibeth Abdelord, who is actually from Tactics Ogre. That guy's a crossover. And when his music, Blasphemous Experiment, started playing, I was the only guy in the group to kind of drop everything and go, you're kidding me, this is happening right now?
Absolutely popping off.
Insane.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, it's mostly there because Yoshimi is a fanboy.
Yes, considering
to be fair, that's literally half of Yoshimi's MO.
It works.
It is. It works. And I'm okay with that. And we may as well talk about the game in question now, so let's dive right into it. My first song pick is the most obvious song pick for this topic, and that is Rebellion/Revolt/Thunder, depending on the translation, done in this case for the PSP version of Tactics Ogre. Oh, hey, look, we're going full circle. This song is Hitoshi Sakimoto at his absolute most John Williams, and I am here for it.
For those who might not know what that term might mean, broad strokes, wide-reaching, hopeful, forward-pressing. you can definitely feel that this piece is a charged victory.
Yeah, big thematic statement. Big thematic statement.
It's
Y'all
like
know
a
me.
tale,
Y'all know the
a
kind of music I listen
journey, a
to.
heroic journey.
Right? This is a song that really has been part and parcel of the Ogre Battle series from the very beginning. The very first SNES Ogre Battle, this was its main theme. It's been remixed, redone 1,000,001 times. I mentioned I put like 200 hours into Tactics Ogre. I must have put like 800 hours into Ogre Battle 64, of which this song, again, played a big part.
Huh.
And this version is, at least for now, the definitive version in my mind, because, hey, live orchestra. Am I ever going to argue
The
with
only
live orchestra?
way they could make it more definitive is if they release an entirely new, super cool Tactics Ogre.
Yeah, but a funny thing about November, huh?
No, I said entirely new.
Oh. Well, a new Ogre game of any kind would be welcome.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing what the follow-up to Person of Lordly Caliber would actually be, but that's a whole other set of conversations, so not really relevant for this particular one.
Hey,
because...
look, I got my new Valkyrie game. You're allowed to hope.
Yes. We'll be definitely talking about that at some point in the future, let me tell you. The song itself is, you know, big, straightforward orchestral. It's got the, like, big string score. It compositionally, it's about as on the nose as it gets. Like, it's not trying anything new. As I said, it's very John Williams.
Yeah, like, it's a perfect first song because it's the platonic ideal of a tactics game song. The composition is there, the pacing is perfect. It's the ideal song to look at a grid of people and decide who's gonna murder who in what order.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely accurate. And, I will say, though, even though it's not really trying anything new, compositionally, this is extremely strong. That melody line is just hook after hook after hook. It gets in your head.
I mean, don't break what's not broken.
Pretty much. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I think is the words you were looking for.
Sometimes words are hard.
Sometimes words are hard.
I may be an English major, but I know that for a fact because of that.
I hear you. I mean, you would be in the best position to know, I think. I really like the bridge where it kind of slows down and chills and then builds back up into the main reprise.
Yeah, and that's something I've noticed in a lot of the tracks we're going to talk about. There's very often a little bit of breathing room every now and then.
Which I think is good.
Yeah.
Just because some of these pieces can be... There's a difference between pressing and oppressive.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's room to go real hard on music in these games, usually in like more challenging or more urgent fights, or rescue missions or boss fights. This is not that. This is a statement of fact. This is the game itself. We're not talking about the crazy stuff, and there's no shortage of songs that go hard on the Tactics Ogre soundtrack.
Yes. I mean, we talked about Blasphemous Experiment before.
Yeah, and that's a song that's actually a little more chill, I think, than deserves, but this is one of the most vile and recurring bad guys.
To it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, musically, you end up with this just great tapestry that, again, it sells the scene. It sets the scene. Love the use of horns here. I'm not usually a horns guy, but I think, like, they don't overdo it.
Yes. It's not like, say, the entirety of the Final Fantasy XII soundtrack.
I mean, that's another Sakimoto soundtrack, and it's a very good one, but yeah, he does kind of overdo it at times. There's a couple songs that are like, calm down, my friend.
Yeah, no, here there's definitely more of a balance.
Yeah.
So, Rana, I think that you were talking about something before about another game that was remade and some tracks that are interesting between the two.
Very much so. But before I talk about Fire Emblem, I wanted to briefly mention a game that I didn't put in because it was too easy to do literally anything with it.
Oh dear.
So Yes, Project Cross Zone and Project Cross Zone 2 are tactics game. So what's wrong with talking about music from them?
It's
Go on,
like an
ask,
ultra...
I dare you.
Okay, what's wrong with putting music in from that game that's a tactics game and it's not an ultra crossover at all or anything like that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Galen Firestone, my friend. The thing is that this would allow me to basically cheat at this episode, and I would only do that if it wasn't tactics game, which is a genre that I genuinely like. And so, why would I use that crutch of a game to avoid talking about tactics track and instead talk about, say, Ryu's theme from Street Fighter, Zero's theme from Mega Man X. There's some Mega Man X4 in there as well. There's some Yakuza tracks. There's some Resonance of Fate tracks. There's some advertising track from the Sega Saturn in there.
An advertising track from the Sega Saturn.
Yes, because Segata Sanshiro is a playable support character in the second game. This game allows me to cheat so hard that that I could bring it up as well in the now playing section, even though I'm not playing it, because a Xenoblade character is there and I am playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This game lets me cheat so hard that I can loop back around and be in the expected areas again, because there's also Chrom and Lucina from Fire Emblem Awakening and characters from Sakura Wars, which is also a tactics game.
I feel like I'm being subtweeted for the April Fool's episode, but that was literally the joke.
Exactly.
Even I didn't know about that. Don't wrap me into that.
And so, I just wanted to make sure you know that I had this at my disposal and chose to be reasonable for once.
And we thank you for that.
Correct. Though I will admit that the one time I did, actually cheat, I made an actual point. And I'm going to actually, once again, talk about Xenoblade, because back in the Fighting Games episode, I brought in Mechanical Rhythm from Xenoblade because it was in Smash, and literally, if I was a jerk, I would do this, and then as I was thinking about it, wait, I actually have something to say, I need to add this. And I believe I apologized for it in advance, but going, I actually have a discussion point?
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I applaud creative thinking on this show, but I outright cheating kind of rubs me the wrong way, unless that's the entire joke. So thank you for your restraint.
You're welcome. Now then, march to Deliverance from Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia. Or Shadows of Valentia? Shadows of Valentia, yes. That sounds right. And it's written right in front of me in the production order. It's actually not a music that happens during the fights, but right before them, as you're preparing and deciding which units and loadouts you're bringing up for the coming battle.
Really? This is a preparation track?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have called that.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much in tune with the rest of the pace of the game. And as a result, you hear it a lot, and if you're anything like me, you don't mind, because it's a really nice introduction for an epic in the original sense of the word.
Yeah. This has some big vibes to it. I would also make the argument this is kind of the platonic ideal of the more, tense and aggressive tactics RPG sound.
Yeah, this one goes forward for sure.
Yeah.
A common theming of this is, not only just this, but also others, but this one is just that ideal that the constant pressure forward from the background, making the player feel like the only way is forward. No retreat, no surrender style.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about a couple of similar songs later on. That's another recurring theme in our selections.
One other thing I really like, and that's very much more particular to this theme, however, is that there's a complementarity to it. There's a calm and a more powerful part that sometimes even overlap but remain distinct, which is a nice way to say both how it's a tale of two different scales and also a tale of two different protagonists. Because that's one of the main thing of this game compared to other games in the series, in that you have Arm and you have Celica as the two protagonists, each with their own armies.
Which is cool. I've got to be honest, Celica is one of the few Fire Emblem characters I know, and I have a quasi-irrational hatred of her.
That bad.
Okay, so once upon a time there was a game called Fire Emblem Warriors. And Celica was one of the playable characters in Fire Emblem Warriors, and she was just a Marth clone in terms of moveset, and I'm like, I already kind of don't like that moveset. And she was voiced by Erika Lindbeck. Now, by this point in time, Erika Lindbeck is kind of this monster of an actor. But at the time, this was only the second role that I'd ever heard from her, following Anemone from Nier Automata. Both roles were just kind of her worst. And I became convinced that I didn't really like her as an actor.
Oh.
Right after playing this game, I played Tales of Berseria, where she played a major role, and then Persona 5, where she played a major role, and then she keeps showing up and other stuff being awesome, and then I kind of go back to Fire Emblem Warriors, and I'm like, wow, she just wasn't good for this part, at least in terms of the Warriors aspect. And it made me briefly consider that I didn't like her as an actor, which turned out to be the opposite of the case. She's probably my favorite of this newest crop of English voice actors, and, I kind of hate Celica for turning me against an actor I would eventually really come to appreciate.
Honestly, I didn't have any problem with her performance in Shadows of Valentia itself, so I don't know if that's warrior-specific lines or anything like that. I couldn't tell. What I can tell, however, is that this track also manages to both elevate and keep the personality of the original, because Shadows of Valentia is, like Zeral said during her transition, a remake from Fire Emblem Gaiden.
Right.
And so you have the original on the NES, and obviously it's much more simple, because there's only so many audio channels there, but the composition by itself is still very solid and still has this arrow that it's pointing forward, ever onwards.
Yeah, the composition definitely maintains, but I agree with you. It does absolutely elevate the remix absolutely does elevate it from the source material. And I love it when that happens, just in general.
Yeah, like, it's
Same.
basically the difference between seeing 4 people fighting with sticks and seeing entire armies clash.
Right.
For me, my best comparison point for music is Pokémon, because of their consistent amount of remakes that they do. But
Go on.
the elevation from where some tracks originally were to where they are in the remakes. For instance, the recent Diamond and Pearl remix. The difference between Cynthia's theme before and Cynthia's theme in the new one, while they did begin to work with orchestral sounds in original Diamond and Pearl, they elevated it and made it even better with the remake, making it fuller, making it more intimidating and above, because that
Even
is the
though
champ.
even though it's a bit different in this game, because Cynthia's theme was very electronic.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's certainly an elevation in both cases, but not this idea that it's swelling the importance and moving it forward to this, like I said, epic air to it.
I think the glow up between Gaiden and Shadows of Valentia is one of the biggest and best glow ups of music that I've seen.
Big words, but honestly, the only reason I wouldn't necessarily agree is because the original's composition is already as solid as it is in my eyes.
I'm not saying that it was bad.
Oh yeah, no, clearly.
It's...
No, but like, if the floor is higher, the ceiling needs to be higher to compensate.
Absolutely.
That's all. Yeah, like another track in this game that does even more an impressive job was the boss track, which I didn't pick only because it's basically a 20-second loop, and they decided to basically shove an entire orchestra into a blender and condensate it as hard as they can to fit in those 20 seconds absolutely everything. It's crazy.
That sounds like a wild 20 seconds. I might have to hear this at some point.
Well, it'll only take 20 seconds.
That's fair.
Anyway, that's all I have to say for now on March to Deliverance. So let's move on to a completely different series. Zeral, take it away.
About that.
Yes.
Look, my love for Three Houses is strong, and I'm about to show it. Apex of the World. While the introduction,
the
introduction of electric sounds changes the dynamic slightly, it still has the driving tempo of tactics games, pushing the player forward to the next decision, the next tactic, and movement. The specific strength of the Edge of Dawn leitmotif is that it feels conclusive in its feeling, but also gives a glimmer of hope for a person.
Yes, it's climactic, very much so.
Yeah.
There's mystique to it, there's an intensity to it with the voices, but it's very much like the track says, the apex. It's now, after this moment, things will never be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it takes parts from multiple songs, in fact, to wrap things up. There's some Floodline Rains in there too.
Mm-hmm. And while I did only place the Rain version, there are actually two versions of Apex of the World in the game. Rain and Thunder. One which has a more, like, you can feel it just as its pure form. Thunder having the drums in the background more pronounced as it resounds through the field.
Right.
Yeah, and the difference in usage is that they have the system in Three Houses, where they have a bass track when you're just reviewing the units and the likes, and when a battle actually happens, because the animation isn't like, say, a Tactics Ogre, where a sword slash is just lift the sword, slash the sword, that took under a second. There, it's longer, it's more involved, everybody needs to do their flourishes and the likes, and so that gives them a little bit of time to increase the intensity of the track, blending the two versions together so that it swells up to the Thunder version and then returns after the fact to the Rain version.
And there's technically one more version, though we're gonna say that for now playing. Because that's gonna be that's fun to talk about, and that's from Three Hopes.
In fact, there's more than one version there, but we'll return to that later.
Mm-hmm.
I sense a follow-up discussion incoming. My thoughts on this song, I keep trying to form an opinion about it. I've listened through it maybe 3 or 4 times in preparation for this episode. I don't know. It just feels like Fire Emblem.exe to me. Like, it's just, it feels like just the modern variation of the music that I'm used to out of this, what little of this franchise I've heard.
Yeah, which makes sense since, like I said, it takes part of a lot of previous songs.
Right. I don't know. I'm having trouble forming an opinion on this one. Is I guess my take, which isn't much of one, but I don't know. It's
No, it's interesting because if it builds up on what comes before, if you don't have the context of what comes before, some of the impact might be lost.
That's a very good point.
That makes sense.
That is a very good point.
And this game thrives on knowing what comes before.
Although thankfully not to the point of needing to play multiple games to enjoy any individual entry,
Cough,
save
cough,
for a
Fates.
few continuities.
Cough, cough, Fates.
No, Fates was more a case of having Pokemon Blue and Red system.
Yeah, but the only difference is Yellow is DLC instead of a third disc altogether.
And also bad.
You're not the first person to have told me this. I know very little about Fire Emblem that isn't crossed over with Dynasty Warriors, so I don't really have, like, I played one of the older ones for like 5 minutes, decided I hated the battle system, but that was the end of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same genre as, say, a Tactics Ogre, but it feels very different.
It feels very different.
How it works.
I personally found it a little more uncomfortable, but again, that's just personal taste. On the other hand, so we mentioned Tactics Ogre a lot around here, but Tactics Ogre is technically a spin-off of a more real-time-ish, heavy on the ish, tactics game, Ogre Battle. And there was a long drought in the Ogre series between Ogre Battle 64 and PSP's Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together.
Oh, yes.
In the midst of this, Nippon Ichi, my nemesis, it feels like, they're almost as like, why are you the way that you are, in my mind, as Compile Heart is, but Compile Heart is even worse. Nippon Ichi tends to make a lot more, like, lighthearted fare. They'll have, like, actual emotional moments, but I don't think Nippon Ichi has themselves made or developed in one of their internal studios a serious RPG of any kind. Not really. They published a few. I think they're currently the publishers of the Legend of Heroes series, which definitely skews more serious. But generally speaking, you think of Nippon Ichi, you think of Disgaea and games like that are very, like, peppy and funny and very jokey, and while they'll have serious moments, generally speaking, it's more in line with the comedy and having a good time and not taking itself too seriously. So,
no objection fair.
Yeah. So a game like Soul Nomad, which definitely skirts the more serious line harder than any other Nippon Ichi game, developed game I've ever played, that also happens to be based heavily on and a quasi-spiritual successor to Ogre Battle, was kind of a miracle. Like, I actually kind of want to replay this, and this happened during the drought between Ogre Battle 64 and Let Us Cling Together on the PlayStation Portable.
Yeah, like, as far as I know, this is the brownest Nippon Ichi game.
Oh, color scheme, it's very brown, yes, but, in terms of its content, it still has joking elements, but it definitely is a lot more serious, and especially towards, like, the second half of the game, like, not even towards the end, the second half of the game, the joking becomes much, like, fewer and far between, and even the, like, weird, like, quirky mini-boss you keep fighting over and over again suddenly gets this sad backstory, and it's just like, oh, wow, they're really going for it on this game. To the point where they have an alternate mode, the Demon Path, which is probably one of the darkest modes I've ever played in a video game. Which is really saying something. None of that is particularly relevant to this song, however. This song is Rock and Rock's one of the, like, harder battle / boss themes of Soul Nomad.
It rocks.
Rocks hard.
Yeah, it does. Although one thing I noticed when I selected this song, and I don't know how I didn't notice this, I'm a big fan of a Swedish melodic death metal band called Dark Tranquillity. In fact, one of the 3 bands, along with In Flames and At the Gates, that basically invented melodic death metal. Man, the intro to Rock and Rock sounds an awful lot like a Dark Tranquillity track. Like a specific one.
They're the same picture.
Yeah, they're the same picture. Very much so.
Corporate wants you to find the different things picture.
Yep, exactly. These are similar enough that I have to assume there's some, like, when worlds collide / fiend thing going on here when, like, I feel like there was some direct inspiration going on, even if it was accidental. Like, it's too close to be otherwise. Once you're out of the intro, the song definitely does its own thing, and definitely...
Yeah, like at the best, it's the composer that listened to that other track, slept, forgot about where it came from, or that he listened to that track specifically, but still had it in his head, and decided to put it in this game.
That sounds about right. But man, if you're talking a tense action song for a tactical RPG, because unlike Ogre Battle, this one actually was turn-based going into the battles. Like, it didn't do what Ogre Battle does, where it has all the units moving. It's a lot closer to Disgaea than Ogre Battle is, but that's, it's still that middle ground.
When I listen to this track, what I see, because I haven't played that game, but I can definitely see a game with some very flashy special attacks in particular.
Yeah. And it's definitely a game that I kind of want to revisit and see if it holds up. One day, maybe. But, yeah, no, this track definitely goes hard and doesn't really quit. Like, it does have that breathing room a little bit towards the middle, but not nearly to the same degree as some of the other songs. Like, its bridge is quieter, but not really quiet.
It definitely skirts that line that I said earlier, between oppressive and pressing.
Yeah. Like, you hear this song playing, you gotta move. Now...
Which kinda makes me wonder, given the steady pace of a tactics game, when is a fast track too fast for the genre?
Honestly, that depends entirely on the scenario, because we're going to be talking about a couple of tracks later that actually go way harder and still feel right for what they're playing.
Yep.
I don't think... Again, this one's for kind of... I don't think it was actually for a boss sequence. It's been a while, so I don't actually remember. But this one definitely goes as hard as it needs to. I don't recall from my playthrough of this game anything being particularly jarring.
Well, that's good. Means that... a right track is nothing more than a right tool for a right job at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If it needs to go hard, it can go hard in whatever genre of game it needs to.
Yep. This is definitely one of the better tracks from, really honestly for me, anything Nippon Ichi developed. And I'm going to emphasize developed again because published is a whole other category.
Of course.
I've never found their music to be that strong. Like, it's never been bad, but it's never really been that memorable either.
You did mention Disgaea earlier.
I did.
I am very inclined to disagree on the basis of a specific game, which is not even the game I'm going to talk about very soon, but they literally made a game that's a musical.
Wait, what?
Huh?
Yeah, Rhapsody, a musical adventure.
Oh.
It is an actual musical.
Huh.
I have
It's good.
So many questions. Okay. Okay.
I know some of those songs by heart.
Okay, maybe that one turns a corner. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, sometimes you just slip between the raindrops, so to speak.
I feel like that's a reference that we're
Same.
not getting.
No, that's not.
Okay, then never mind.
That's just a weird French trying to speak English kind of formulation. Take no heed. And carry on.
On the subject of carrying on, we were just talking Disgaea. Maybe we should talk Disgaea.
Let's talk Disgaea. So, Hysteric Kingdom from Disgaea. Essentially, this is the Nipponichification of one of the first tracks we've covered. Like, that's very much something with a tactics pace to it.
Right.
But at the same time, it manages to add a bit of whimsy and a bit of chaos in it, which stretches the theme, turns it around, subverts it a little maybe, and it's pretty good by itself, but looking into it for this podcast made me respect it even more. Like, the way the music's elements are layered on each other is really nice, because it both keeps a steady pace, but at the same time, essentially the musical phrases on the foreground and the background seem to play a bit of a relay race when one starts, then passes to the other, and then ends, while the other eventually continues, passes back to the front, then ends, and they have this interplay like that, but manages to add the more personally driven and the more chaotic energy that fits the theme and the universe of Disgaea without detracting from the steady pace of a tactics track.
Right. We call that point-counterpoint composition, is the official term for it.
Point-counterpoint composition. Wonderful.
It's a fun little term.
Yeah. Dueling banjos is a great example of point-counterpoint. For those of you fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how much of a purist you are, who saw the special edition of Return of the Jedi, the new version of that song at Jabba's Palace is also a good example of point-counterpoint.
Yeah, so there's, of course, a lot of drums to drive that there is a militaristic aspect to it all, but instead of an organized army fighting for justice, it's a bunch of loosely organized, backstabbing demon murder hobos.
So, regular adventures, right. Got
Yeah,
it.
that sounds about right. That's
Exactly. Also giving me some real Soul Calibur vibes.
Oh, I didn't hear that at first, but now that I'm thinking about the track, I think you may have hit the nail on the head there. Interesting.
I think somebody in the comment section of one of the versions of that track hit the nail on the head, and I just copied his remark. Or their remark, really.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it's like, oh yeah.
Once you say that, I can hear it pretty clearly.
Exactly. And of course, as a big Soul Calibur fan, this appeals to me.
Yeah. Very understandably so. I actually will have a question for you about now playing in regards to that, but let's move on.
Good.
Yeah, this song is cool. It's definitely one of the better songs out of Disgaea. It's another of these songs that I still don't have anything like really definitive, like emotional connection to. It's fine. It's a fine song. I don't think it's very memorable, but it's interesting enough. It's certainly, again, it's one of these that just doesn't detract.
Yeah, I picked this one specifically because it's one of the most normal sounding. Because that soundtrack goes into weird ways, which makes sense given its weird setting. But it's nice to have some tracks where they are grounded, because there's a lot of levels to go through, even in the story, without taking account the absolute infinity of dungeons you have available.
Right. Maybe too much. Item World was a mistake.
It's nice if you love the grind and want more excuse to grind your grinding implements while you grind as a grind.
Yes.
But as much as I understand big number go bigger as an appeal,
Sometimes you can have too
it
much
can
big
only
number.
carry me so far, yes.
There's
Like, I went endgame on the first Disgaea, but none of the others, even though they elaborate in some pretty interesting ways. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this track. It's very solid and still manages to have its personality shine through. Speaking of weird variation to established theme, how about some Pokémon?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's a deep cut. Anyone who was back in the dark ages of that weird Twilight area between the DS ending and the 3DS starting remembers that game that came out between Black and White and Black and White 2 called Pokémon Conquest.
Yes, and
Now,
I think
Pokémon
my
Conquest-
response was, what?
Now, Pokémon Conquest, it's not a regular Pokemon game. It's not a ranger game. It's not a mystery dungeon game. It's not any of the weird side spin-off things. It's a crossover
one of
with
the weird
Nobunaga's
side spin-off.
ambition.
So, a story about this one. This one threw me the heck off. I'm a big Samurai Warriors fan. Shocker, I know. I talk about Dynasty Warriors like every week on this show, it seems like. And I remember going into RPG Fan, this new site that I like, and seeing Nobunaga from Samurai Warriors 3 plastered on it. I'm like, the heck is going on here? It was not a crossover I was expecting at all.
But it does some amazing things. For instance, it's OST. There was a few tracks that I was thinking about bringing up here. The episode start theme, perhaps, or normal battle, but I decided to heat it up a little bit. Pun absolutely intended.
Ha.
So I decided to go with the fire battle. So there were themes made for every single type battle.
I was
that you could
literally
fight within
about
the game.
to ask. Okay.
There's the normal fire, water, grass, electric, rock, all of those. There's also like boss theme, legendary theme, variations on a theme. But each one has its own specific flair to it. And Fire Battle is one that uses its instrumentation, I think, the best for where it is. It is a track that combines the feeling that Pokemon normally has, that breathy, like, open feeling, with the shogunate feel of the battlefields of Nobunaga Past. While I haven't
Yep.
played a Nobunaga before, I still can understand the feel and the know that.
Yeah, like, it's very honorable Edo era battle, even without any Pokemon context to it. The instrumentation is very much there.
When I was listening to this, I was thinking to myself that the Samurai Warriors influence, at least on the music, is actually rather clear. Like, if this were playing at, like, Odawara Castle or something, I wouldn't have batted an eye.
Yeah, and what ties things up even more clearly is that we've said before in an episode that Dynasty Warriors has its sound, which is very guitar heavy, and Samurai Warriors, excluding 5, has its sound as well,
Right.
which is much more electronic. And what also has those kind of sounds in general is the Pokémon games. Past the original, where it was difficult to distinguish between instruments, but once they had their own sounds, they had, for a lot of them, a bit of futuristic kind of a background sound that we can definitely hear, that almost used as a bass in this case.
Right.
And the way that ties up those different influences and kind of show what they have in common is a nice little intersection.
And it still has that driving theme of a tactics game.
Right.
Of a tactics game. But it also combines the full feeling of the crossover franchises.
Like, even without context, you hear that track, that's a battle track.
Yeah, 100%.
Not a frantic one, but a calculated one. You know, there's some strategy going on.
And it's perfect which makes it perfect for a tactical, just, alright, focusing on this, keep it up, alright, let's do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels right from what little I know of the game. This is just sort of one of those giant question marks out there that I almost want to play on a whim just to see if it's any good. Just because it's just so out there.
It is.
I've heard decent things about it from the people who've played it.
So have I.
Yeah, but its very existence is like, oh yeah, that happened.
Kind of a dancing bear situation. It doesn't really matter if the bear dances well, it's that it dances at all.
Beautifully said.
Which, bringing that up again, reminder, this happened in the black and white, between black and white and black and white 2. The DS was on the way out.
Yeah, and then the 3DS would take 2 years to have any good games on it.
Ouch!
So, look, Super Mystery Dungeon didn't do any favors.
Okay. I don't know, I thought that Ocarina remake was pretty good.
No, okay.
It's a remake, come on.
Well,
I had to wait until Kid Icarus Uprising and Fire Emblem Awakening to justify the purchase.
I mean, as far as the 3DS is concerned, I waited all the way till Linked Between Worlds, so I get it.
Pokemon Black for me.
I see.
Speaking of obscure deep cuts. What?
Speaking of absolute masterpieces, you mean? Front Mission 3, come on.
Not sure Front Mission's a deep cut, even I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mine is more of a deep cut than his is.
I agree. I'm going to go for a deeper cut further on. Front Mission is a pretty popular series that hasn't had any entry recently, although here's hopes that the remakes of 1 and 2 will revive a bit of interest in the franchise. But as far as the general opinion is concerned, the series peaked at 3, which is convenient because that's the only one I really played.
Oh, there you go. So now that brings a question that I have, because my brain is like, I can't keep track of all of these. This isn't the one that was from Software, is it?
No, that's Armored Core.
That's Armored Core, okay.
Yeah, Front Mission is from Square.
Oh!
What?
It is?
I think so.
This doesn't sound anything... I say this doesn't sound like anything Square's ever done, but I'm the guy playing Power Wash Simulator right now, and that's definitely not like anything Square's ever done, so,
Yep, no,
whatever.
I confirm that's by Square.
Okay.
Developed and published.
That's...
Is a good word for it. I wouldn't have even remotely called that. Because this song is like very march, very hit the beat hard as you can.
It's definitely hits the chord of crashing forward, brutal, mechanical engines of war rather than like specific soldiers.
It's a march.
Yeah, like to clarify, Front Mission 3 is a tactics game that happens with pilots piloting mechs.
Right.
Which justifies already a bit of mechanical sounds and a bit of weight to them. And that's really part of what drove me to pick it for this episode, because I wanted also tracks that weren't only in a medieval setting. And naturally thought back to Front Mission because it's very, very good, has a lot of content, had probably a better in-universe internet navigator than the actual internet navigators at the time, because it's from 1907, I think. Yeah, as far as this track goes, the weight is incredible. Like, that's about a mech that takes more than one tile, when one tile is already the size of a small building. But even through that, there's still this warlike theme that's somehow common to the more medieval settings games of the tactics genre. The drums are still there, but they are way heavier. There's drums on top of drums on top of drums. They pan around, which really makes it feel like the threat is bigger than you because it surrounds you like that.
Right.
Kind of feels like you just insulted a building and the building decided you need your face punched. Except you actually the size of a bug as well.
That's a metaphor.
Yeah. My point being, it sounds huge.
It does sound huge. That is one thing
Absolutely.
This does very right.
Yes. And if it's the only things it wants to convey, I think it does a pretty good job.
Yeah, that gets the mission accomplished button press for sure.
And that's pretty much all I have to say about that track. Sometimes being big's a quality of its own. And being mechanically big makes sense for a mecha game.
Right.
And now let's go to another interesting variation in theme and color, contrasting the more standard tactics game we've had. Let's go black, white, and red with some Othercide.
So, Othercide is a game I played for a Halloween special for one day, and I always intended to go back to it, because it was a fascinating game. I never did. And this is unfortunate because this game is actually like really cool. This is a much deeper cut. This one's an actual deeper cut. Because
Yeah, like it's recent but indie and interesting.
Yeah, it has some like roguelike elements. You're not supposed to win most of the time. You've got to kind of go through iterations to build yourself up to get to the point where you can win. It's got quasi permadeath, and I say quasi in that you're going to end up with a lot of like dead units that stay that way, but there are specific ways to resurrect specific ones of them, and eventually towards the end of the game, you're just going to use the same 3 characters and just resurrect them constantly. But you have to get to that point. This game is kind of a post-apocalypse quasi-demon game, and it's really, really weird, and weird in a good way.
Yes.
I can feel that.
Yeah.
The track that you chose in Desperate Battle, the slow feel helps emphasize the meaning of the title for it. Like, not only just it has the normal drums of a tactical game, like the pressing forwardness, but it's still slow and dread.
Yeah.
The sharp
like,
the sharp violin and chimes also help draw out that feeling of dread and fear that comes from from a hopeless situation, which, as you've described from the game, like, that's the main point.
Yeah, this is a horror game. It's a horror strategy RPG. And unlike other attempts I've seen at the genre, like, as joking as it was, Grotesque Tactics, which lived up to its name, it actually largely succeeds in creating kind of a horror environment. It's got a real Lovecraftian vibe to it throughout.
And you can hear that very much.
Yeah.
Because the contrast between the soft pace, the low drums, and the very high-pitched instruments adds a dissonance that really helps the horror aspect when the track is not using more violins to have more of a almost Castlevania feel to it.
Yeah. No, I would actually agree with that. Not nearly as melodic as Castlevania, that's for sure. Which I think works to its credit. This is very much an Eddie track. I was thinking of him when I selected it. It's dark, ambient, it's atmospheric, it's still got some vibe to it. It's not absent melody. It's not like completely ambient, obviously.
Obviously.
I think its melody line is actually pretty solid. But it's very different from the other selections here today. And I think like this was actually my second pick when I was picking my songs for the week. I knew, like, all right, well, I have to go with Tactics Ogre because duh. But let's also grab one from Othercide because I have not given that game enough love, and I really need to go back to it. It's been like 3 years. I'm probably going to have to restart at this point. But yeah, I always found the setting fascinating, especially for a tactics game.
Like this setting, it gives me a similar vibe of games like I Divine Cybermancy or Xenoclash, even, of very constructed settings that emphasize doing things extremely differently than any other game of its genre.
Yes, I can absolutely
agree
with that.
They want to stand out, and boy do they.
Yeah, between the roguelike elements and the generative elements and the fact that it is a rather effective horror game.
And the fact it's using 3 colors.
It's using 3 colors. I think there's some yellow in the actual game as well. I think there's a big yellow crystal at some point, but
Oh, well, that's the same as Mad World, then.
There you go.
I will say that, like, yellow being representative of something alien in the way of that, like, that's because you know the three colors that make up, like, what your characters and everything around them are.
Mm-hmm.
And having something completely different and off base from there, that feels like that's problematic.
This also is the only XCOM style, or at least XCOM Enemy Unknown style of tactics RPG that really kind of stuck in my mind. So if you've played, obviously, as I mentioned, XCOM Unknown or like Gears Tactics, this plays more like that than something grid-based.
Basically the ones where the angle of the cover matters.
Yes. Also, Diofield Chronicles, which, has anyone actually played that? I know technically I'm skipping ahead to now playing, but I think that's out now. Has anyone even looked into that?
Is it?
I've heard of it, but I haven't really looked into it.
I feel like it may have released.
Nope, September 22.
I lied.
You did. Again.
I am bad at this today. I really thought I heard that it was out. Whatever. Now, I've got to say, the XCOM style has never personally appealed to me to any incredible degree. But there are some exceptions. And I feel like as a gateway, especially if you're into the horror genre, this one works. I think its soundtrack really helps sell it. On the other hand, it's not like XCOM themselves has a bad version of, a soundtrack. That song you picked, Rana, is kind of no joke.
I wonder if you are going to like it. Before we go, I believe you should like I said, acknowledge what's going on in your background?
Yeah, let me do that. So, there's some construction going on outside, and as much as I try to soundproof my office, unfortunately, the new place is not nearly as tight as the LA place. So, there's this tile cutter that's going on outside. If there's tile cutter noise in my audio, there's very little I could do about that short of pausing the episode and coming back to it later, which I don't think any of us can really schedule right now.
At least it isn't the rooster.
I'm soundproofed enough for that guy. I'm soundproofed enough for that rooster, who... I may as well tell this story. So the other day, I actually had, like, the worst migraine of my life and woke up at 4 a.m. and, like, trundled into my office to try to do something, anything. And at 4 a.m, it was still pitch black out. The rooster started going.
Oh yeah, they don't wait.
I'm like, the sun isn't even up. I understand you crowing all throughout the day. It's not that right now. It is literally nighttime. There is no sunlight. Stop!
So anyway, the next track is called Kill Them All being capitalized.
Yes.
And yeah, what's happening is that this is definitely a case where it's maybe a bit too fast or intense for a tactics games, but there's a reason for that. So XCOM Apocalypse, the third mainline XCOM series before they rebooted, is a bit of a hybrid tactics game. They experimented with a few things, one of them being the possibility to have real-time combat instead of turn-by-turn.
What a concept.
And the soundtrack had to work for both modes. And so yeah, they had to match that pace, and that in part explains the intensity of that track. The other part is that the music changes mid-map, because there's some much calmer tracks when you're exploring buildings around. It's only buildings, there's no nature, because it all is happening in a single city. And so you're just searching through office buildings, where the aliens may be, the movement is hidden, they're lurking around, and suddenly you see someone pop off, and the threats are pretty big right from the start. Like, one of the main bioweapons the enemies are using isn't even that direct weapon. It's a gun that shoots other smaller aliens, named Brainseeker, and if one manages to get in melee range and jump on one of your soldiers, that soldier is instantly lost mind controlled forever. Except if that soldier is a cyborg, of course.
That's brutal.
Yes, it is.
That's
like,
a lot.
Yeah, and given that level of threat, that level of music makes more sense.
Yeah.
No
Especially
kidding.
given that you have some pretty hefty weaponry to fight back. Like, one of the main issues I have with Apocalypse is that you start with all of those awesome options. You have laser sniper rifles and heavy Tommy guns and autocannons that can fire explosive or incendiary ammo, and
You lose them all after the first mission?
nope, that's
Okay.
not the problem. There's two problems. One is that, like I discovered when I tried the real-time mode, if you have a soldier with some reaction available that is lurking about with, say, an autocannon you forgot was loaded with incendiary ammo, the problem is that he's going to use it. And if you destroy buildings, you may have the owner of those buildings get kind of mad at you and cut your fundings, which is already pretty fun. But no, the main problem is that you start with all of those awesome options, even have a limited amount of anti-gravity armor, and the endgame weapons are a squirt gun. Sure, loaded with chemicals that dissolves the enemy aliens, but it's just a tiny piddly thing that goes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, you start with all of those huge explosive weapons and you end up with that.
That is...
Of course, in that context, the kind of intensity of the battles gets a bit lost. But initially, it works great.
It goes from intense military, like, fighting aliens with the power of, like, military might to comical and absurd. That's...
Yes.
I kind of love that, but I'm also kind of terrified of that.
Yeah.
Good. The game isn't bad as far as I'm concerned, however. It does... let's just say that other games in the genre manage to better represent an escalation in power level, including the post-reboot XCOMs, which are all very good as well. But their music tends to be more kind of Hollywood heroics kind of a tone, while this one is more about a few scared yet heavily armed rookies about to get in a dirty scraps, and whatever happens, nobody's going to truly be a winner, including the owner of that terrain and the terrain next door.
That is...
And again, when music matches gameplay like that, it just tickles me the right way.
Yeah, no, obviously when things connect well, it's always good.
And yes, like Geisterfuchs says in chat, you can indeed do things like, if you are not afraid of losing funding for a peculiar faction, just raise the whole building and call it a day.
I mean, that's a good option.
It is.
I forget, do they have that stuff in Unknown?
To a degree, the main difference is that there's 8 levels of elevation in Apocalypse, and in Unknown there's like 2, 3.
Yeah.
So you can definitely throw a grenade under an alien that's on the floor above it, and that will definitely be effective. But you can't really destroy all of the walls and annihilate a building the way this game lets you do. Anyway, yeah, it's also a game that's happening further in the future than any other game in the series, except maybe Enforcer, which is a third-person shooter. What were you saying?
Is it further than Remake XCOM 2?
Yes, definitely, because Remake XCOM 2 happens a few years after the first one, which happens before the original one, I believe.
Oh.
Or at a similar time frame, anyway. Like, we're talking... original happened in, like, 1990. Apocalypse happens in, like, 2080. Which is why you have robots and hybrid aliens as recruitable characters.
Geister is saying Apocalypse is 97.
That's the release date of the game. I'm talking about the date in the game. Which is 2080, I believe, yes. Which is also why in the track Kill Them All and many other, there is definitely more of a futuristic tone with the electronic instruments used.
So on the subject of games that were released in 1997 to great acclaim, let's talk about probably the game everybody thinks of when they think strategy RPGs. Zeral, take it away.
So, also, going from sci-fi back to medieval.
Yep,
with-
let's bookend this bad boy.
Yeah, back to the top, because it's composed by the same guy as my first pick, too.
Absolutely.
What? You mean there's common links between Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics?
Who would have guessed?
Whoa.
So it is able to pull off the tactics feel, the driving drums, the orchestral full feel that you would normally expect from like the more medieval based tactics games, and just the song that I chose, Trisection, so good at portraying what it does. It actually was placed not just in Final Fantasy Tactics, but also they put it in Final Fantasy XIV in a raid in there, which is how I first learned about it.
Yeah, and I mean, that plodding drums definitely fits 24 angry people running in corridors the size of a building and a half.
Yeah, I believe this was used... I want to say this was for the Agrius boss fight?
This was I might have been about.
No, I think it was used between bosses even.
No.
Yeah. Maybe.
No, it absolutely wasn't, because I remember the songs that were.
Yeah, I think it was for Agrius.
Huh. Well, guess I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV Hadal in a while.
Apropos of nothing, I like that I got to beat up Argath again. Moving on.
To be fair, it doesn't come up a lot on roulettes. Because it's a pretty decently hard raid. But
yeah, and I think currently it's part of the irregular tombstones.
True. Go play the raid, get your tombstones, and listen to this song.
So this song is definitely one of the more angry songs from that soundtrack. We were just talking about that, but that game went a little harder than Tactics Ogre did in general. That one was always a lot more intense, and I think that kind of works to its credit. It kind of sells just how serious the situation in that game is. Tactics Ogre is, I guess, more of a local conflict, while the civil war that's going on in Final Fantasy Tactics it starts angry and stays there, and never really has a moment to calm down except for random battles on the overworld.
Yes, it starts angry and becomes monstrous.
Yes.
That tactics game pace we've mentioned a lot of times already throughout this episode is nailed to a T.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
If not to say that it helped define it in the first place, because it's Final Fantasy Tactics.
It is. It's funny to think that Tactics Ogre actually came first, and Yasumi Matsuno was, in fact, approached by Square to be like, hey, could you do that for this series too?
Yes.
So I always get a laugh out of people saying that Tactics Ogre ripped off FFT when it was actually the opposite.
Classic.
And I say ripped
Isn't
off.
Isn't it crazy that Power Man 5000 ripped off Zoken?
Right? Right? No, obviously Hitoshi Sakimoto is kind of a master of this genre. And while he is very capable of other things, like his work on Dragon Quarter Breath of Fire was really good, obviously his work on Final Fantasy XII, though that one does go a little too hard at times, he is obviously most associated with the tactics genre for this reason. This is just sort of what he does and what he does well.
Don't fix what ain't broken.
Pretty much. Didn't he also do like a weird, crappy Romeo and Juliet anime? Was that him?
You'd have. I don't know. You'd have to look that up.
Yeah. That one's a little off-brand for him, I think. Assuming that was him, I could be wrong. You know what? I'm gonna...
Look, sometimes you get
Yep.
really good composers
Okay,
on
that was.
really things.
Romeo crossed Juliet in 2007.
Yeah, that's a weird fit for him. That's a weird fit for him. But yeah, obviously the soundtrack to Final Fantasy Tactics is a classic for a reason. This came out right around the same time as Final Fantasy VII. It got completely overshadowed. It has a core base of really dedicated fans, myself very highly among them. And the soundtrack really helps with that. We're getting Tactics Ogre on Steam very soon. I'm really hoping we also get Final Fantasy Tactics at some point. According to some leaks and rumors, that's coming as well. I don't know. I'm not putting stock in that just yet, but so far the leak announcement from that...
Let's wait until the confirmation.
Yeah.
I mean, just continue being your prophetic self.
I mean, I've been talking about the possibility of this for a while, and we managed to make it happen. I think our prophecy powers are very good. Yeah, no, I would adore more Tactics, and again, the soundtrack is part of that. This particular song, what can be said about it? It's the same thing. It's got the strong string section, the incredibly strong melody line. It's a little more hardcore minor key, but I don't think there's a problem with that even for 1 second.
Yeah, like the minor key adds... I said Soul Nomad before was definitely the most brown game from Nipponichi. Tactics has this brown quality to it, and that sound is part of it.
I will admit that brown quality is mostly in the artwork and the most powerful character in the game's outfit. It's actually fairly colorful to look at, which is to its credit.
Yeah. Which is one of the staples of Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Which makes me interested in what they're going to do with 16.
We will see. I believe Soken is doing the music on 16. Has that been confirmed?
Yeah.
Yep, it has.
Okay, thought so.
He's been officially credited as the composer of FF14 and Mario 3 on 3 Hoops. That's on his resume. You can't run away from the truth.
No, but I can run away from this topic. On the subject
Remixes!
of Final Fantasy Tactics, on the subject of Final Fantasy Tactics, while we were bringing this up, I remembered a really cool remix by, I believe he's Portuguese, FurDK, a really, really cool remixer.
Oh, so that's how you pronounce it. I did think Ford was strange.
To be honest, I was with Rana on this one.
I'm pretty sure it's FurDK, but maybe it's Furd. Probably not.
No, that's... If it wasn't FurDK before, it is now.
Fair enough. So this guy I first discovered from Nier remixes, actually. He did some really interesting Nier Automata metal remixes, which is, like, for such a vocal soundtrack, usually when they take the vocals out, it makes things worse, but he managed to replace a lot of them with guitar lines and actually make it function. So I have to give him credit for that. So when Materia Collective was putting together their Zodiac album, they got this guy on Run Past Through the Plane. This is not a song that should work. He's good at making things work.
Not with that level of guitar, anyway.
Yeah, he's good at making things work that shouldn't. Because, man, this is good. This
guy would bring a Project Cross onto Flex. That's the kind of guy he is, if it makes that songs work this way.
Yeah, he would. He would. He's got that energy. this particular remix always kind of struck me as this could actually probably go in a more high-energy tactics game itself.
I did mention that, so my notes were, it has the similar feel to the normal Final Fantasy Tactics OST, but it trades out some of the orchestral, like, fullness to the more precision of rock that allows for a more high intensity.
Yeah. When I listened to the song, all I could think of is, man, I thought Dorter Trade City was bad the first time around. I'd hate to hear the version that has this as the soundtrack.
Thanks.
For those of you who don't know, Dorter Trade City is a notoriously difficult early game stage in Final Fantasy Tactics that if you are not prepared for, you are going to get annihilated. And this particular song, or at least the remix of it, or at least the non-remix of it, does not play there. I was about to say it did, and I was about to be a liar again, and then I remembered, no, that's a different song entirely, and I'm going to shut up now.
Good.
I finally managed to stop lying today. Go me.
Just barely.
You've grown.
Just barely.
It's a good song. That's it. That's all I'll say. It's a good song. It's a good remix that shouldn't work, but does. Yeah. Witchcraft.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's as good a note as any to discuss what we are playing. Galen, I let you do the jingle because you do it so well.
Music Arcade, now playing. So I got 2 games on my list, one of which is actually going to get more of a discussion than you might think. And that first one is Square's newest release, Power Wash Simulator.
Okay, you're going to need to justify that.
I am going to. This game has no innate soundtrack. That has been driving me crazy. So I've been hunting for royalty-free music to play because Night Ride FM, despite technically being royalty-free, still has enough copyright trolls going after it that I can't actually play that on my stream without getting muted.
And that's a good idea to stack up on that with a 2-point compass releasing in under a month, I believe.
Yes, exactly. And I discovered this synthwave / synth something, dark wave, cyberpunk wave, whatever. Carl Casey from White Bat Audio. So I've been playing his stuff, and that's all royalty free, all owned by him, released by him, shipped by him, on YouTube and Spotify by him, playlists by him. So I've been using that for Power Wash Simulator. It's maybe a little too hardcore for that game, but I like the vibe and I appreciate that it's royalty-free. And Geister in chat is informing me that Riot released copyright-free music for streamers to use called Sessions. I was not actually aware of this, and I'm going to have to look that up. Royalty fee's pretty great these days. So I wanted to give a shout out to... So I wanted to give a shout out to Carl Casey and White Bat Audio for letting me have something to listen to while I play Power Wash Simulator.
Something's dirty in this dark town, and there's only one thing that can solve it.
Pretty much.
That was my dark wave impression.
Yeah. It doesn't quite fit, but it keeps my ears happy. The other game I've been playing is the Yakuza spin-off Judgment. That game is cool. That game is cool. It's modern day Yakuza 0 without the Japanese porn stars running around.
Yet?
Do we know if they're coming? Because that was, really throwing me off in Yakuza 0, gotta be honest.
I mean, I don't know if they're coming. I haven't played that game.
Fair enough. But yeah.
I don't have a PlayStation.
We could talk about the Hollywood drama behind the Judgment games till we're blue in the face, but the short version is the game just has that kind of techno goodness that the Yakuza series is known for. Nothing like too super memorable, but the battle themes are good, and that's what I like about it.
Rana, do we want to talk about it? Fire Emblem now?
I haven't really touched it since I finished my first playthrough, because I'm waiting on some DLC before tackling the second one, to spice things up a bit. But the short and long of it is that Fire Emblem Three Hopes, the warrior spin-off of Fire Emblem Three Houses, has a very good soundtrack that offers not one but two additional variation to a lot of the track. In fact, maybe three, because there's the main track that's happening when you're just running around murdering enemies by the thousands. You know, the normal settings. Then you have the way it changes for when you're in awakening mode, and you have conversely the way it cools down while you're in the menus, which is also a variation of whatever track you're currently listening to.
I like it when that happens.
The track that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Apex of the World, has those similar variations, Embers and Inferno, which Inferno I have been listening to really nonstop since I heard it first, because it's really good.
Yeah, this one is very good, but my own favorite is more Between Heaven and Earth, which just... I think I talked about it last time. If I didn't, the short of it is that it is absolutely what I could dream of when I think warriorized version of a Three Hopes track that's already pretty good by itself.
Absolutely. I've also been listening to that as well, and they did an amazing job.
Strong choirs, strong guitar, everything is just mwah, chef's kiss. But that isn't what I played the most these days, because since last week I have put another 60 hours into a Switch game, namely Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
I assume Ace Plus and company are putting in their usual good work?
Yep, you assumed correctly. I expected some excellent soundtrack, and I got an excellent soundtrack. This game started out doing a very good job at being exactly what I expected. Which is a good thing, because my expectations were high, and it exactly met them. That's pretty impressive, honestly.
Okay.
And musically as well. Honestly, I probably liked... it is my least favorite Xenoblade soundtrack. But
So
that's mostly because I really love the other game's soundtrack, and this one is just very good.
That does seem like a step backwards, but still very workable.
Yeah, and there's some high points, even though it's happened a lot and will keep happening a lot, the theme for when you start up a chain attack is just a loop of you doing terrible, terrible things to a defenseless enemy, and it just works well.
Now, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
The first game featured tracks by Yoko Shimomura, the second featured tracks by Yasunori Mitsuda. Which legend did they have guesting on this track, on this soundtrack?
Yeah, no, this time Yasunori Mitsuda, Ace, Kenji Hiramatsu, Manami Kiyota, and Mariam Abunasa.
Okay, so the usual suspects. So it's Mitsuda again. They just didn't bring back Shimomura. Okay, cool. I mean, if it worked for Xenoblade 2, it probably works here.
And maybe they'll spice it up a bit for the big story DLC that will release at the end of next year.
Did they already announce that?
Yep.
Oh, great. So they're doing their version of the Golden Country. Cool.
Pretty much. But
So-
yeah, no, very, very fun game. 60 hours in, and still eager to enjoy the main content and the side content as soon as they let me actually stretch my legs a little 12 hours in.
All right. Anything else?
I have one more thing.
Well, I was asking Rana if he has anything else, then we can move over to you.
I didn't. Or if I had, well, I forgot, so it's my fault we're not talking about it.
Okay. Zeral, you're up. What do you got?
So, speaking of things that were slightly prophetic in our own individual times,
Oh, dear.
I recently started playing Hollow Knight in preparation because of all of the stuff going on around the community with Silksong. And then they announced a release date.
that way. I thought you might. I played Hollow Knight to prepare for the Tactics episode, and I
No.
was going to question your sanity.
Well, Hollow Knight is a fantastic game. The aesthetic, the music. I put a little snippet of a thing, like one of the best tracks in the game, in the Music Arcade chat, and it is a beautiful game that has an undertone of dread and curiosity and dark hope in a way.
I think more than anything else, the take I liked the most about this game was from a video review of it that said that it established the difference between a review and a critique. A critique for a piece of art made sense, but a review didn't, because a review is for a product, and as a product, given the sheer amount of content and value it provides for the price it released at, it is completely inattackable.
Mm-hmm.
That game is big for its price, and
Absolutely.
very well polished.
It was done by a small team of people, and it has hand-drawn animation. It has all of the staples of something that just works.
Yep.
And I have been saving up channel points to try and get Galen to play it.
Good luck with that.
I'm still at like the 10,000.
Well, come to the stream more and you'll generate more points.
Yes, that scheme is flawless.
I
I'm
will
trying.
I will try to I will reconfigure the price. I think I overdid when I reconfigured the pick a game. I think I overdid it.
I mean, you have to take into account the statistic anomaly that is Daz's absolute dedication, and we're very thankful for that.
We
on
are
this
very
channel.
thankful for that, but that
You're
has also made my
absolutely-
pick a game list half of the Des show, so it's like,
Mhm.
calm down sometimes.
No,
In
I
any case,
think that's
that
pretty
is
much it.
all for me. I'm gonna get going to. I need to do something really quick.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. You can find all the songs we just talked about in a playlist on our YouTube channel, and you can also get in touch with us via email at music.arcade.podcast@gmail.com or on the Discord following the links in the episode description. I think I see Zeral boarding a truck to kidnap Rana to the anime dimension. I see Kai, I think they call it. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next episode.
You'll never get me alive!
It comes for everyone! Don't fight it!